Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. It's been brought to you today by both Maryland and Mississippi Apex Accelerators. So we're delighted to have them join us today. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak, and I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator here in Maryland. Today, the webinar topic is Understanding the Defense Production Act, and it is led by Matthew Moriarty, who is at Schoonover and Moriarty, LLC. We'll get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Matthew your questions by typing them in the chat box on your screen. We will try to get through as many of them as we can when we pause for Q&A at the end of the presentation. I will also be sending you a copy of the slides, and I do have to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel later today. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Apex Accelerators, it's our mission to assist small businesses to compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. So if you think that this is something you're interested in, you can please just Google Apex Accelerator in your state and it'll come up, and just sign up on the website. All right, well, that's enough for me. So good morning, Matthew. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you so much, and thank you for that lovely pronunciation of my name. Most of the time when people say it, it sounds like, a raven is squawking it at me or something like that. So I appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about the Defense Production Act. This is a topic that frankly has been on the minds of quite a few high up procurement officers basically since COVID, because it's a tool that allows some flexibility in government contracting that might not be available, and it can be used to leverage the government's buying power in unique and potentially successful ways. If anybody has questions while we're going, I know we have a Q&A at the end, but if it's okay with our wonderful organizers, I'm happy to try to answer them as we're going through. I do want to say that I echo everything Yasmin said about Apex Accelerators. They are the best. Unlike me, they don't charge you any money, so the price is right, and they have a great insight into the world of government contracting, and can be a wonderful tool for government contractors to use. That's me. I'm an attorney. We have a law firm out here in the suburbs of Kansas City where we focus only on federal government contracting. We're in our 5th year, and so that's basically it. We run a blog. If you're interested in topics like this and others, it's been a pretty wild time over the last 6 weeks. So you can check our blog and subscribe to get updates. So, but this is actually interesting because this is maybe one of the few topics that hasn't changed in the last 6 weeks. But what we'll be talking about is sort of the origin and the purpose of the Defense Production Act, the structure of the Defense Production Act, what the Title I authorities are, what the Title III authorities are, and a little bit, just a tiny little bit, about Title VII and how it interacts with small business participation. Let me apologize for the sound of my voice. I'm pretty stuffed up. We actually had a blizzard here last night, so I'm coming to you from my basement. So the Defense Production Act is actually a World War II era law, sort of. So what happened during World War II is that the federal government enacted laws during that time that with the intention of rallying the manufacturing base of the country. And this is what really ultimately led to the United States coming out of World War II as a superpower and an industrial juggernaut. In between the time of World War II and the Korean War, those laws were set to expire and did expire. And the manufacturing industry that had grown up took a pivot to civilian production. The idea at that time was that basically nuclear capabilities were going to render warfare totally obsolete. So there was no point in really investing in tanks and vehicles like that, you know. Meanwhile, of course, we know that that was not the case. The Korean War came along less than a decade later, and it was a new type of conflict, and it once again showed that the government lacked the production capacity that it needed, and therefore the idea was to create laws, much like the World War II wartime laws, that would be in effect when needed, but only when needed. That makes sense? Should. This is just a timeline of what we just talked about. What is the Defense Production Act? It is a combination of economic controls that may be used by the president and the president's designees to mobilize American industry for national defense. So that's a mouthful, right? Let's cut it down into little pieces. What do we mean by a combination of economic controls? That would be sort of orders to stockpile materials, place certain things in order of importance above others, that type of thing. Used by the President of the United States and their designees. That means basically the president and other high-ranking officials are the ones who can direct the use of the Defense Production Act. To mobilize American industry for national defense, basically rally American companies in the defense of the country. So, as we said, it has to be for national defense. What is national defense? How is that defined? Pardon me. In the Defense Production Act, what national defense means is programs for military and energy production or construction, military or critical infrastructure, assistance to any foreign nation, homeland security, stockpiling, space, and any directly related activity. This definition has since been expanded to include emergency preparedness. So that means all those activities designed or undertaken to prepare for or minimize the effects of a hazard upon the civilian population, to deal with the immediate emergency conditions which would be created by the hazard, and to effectuate emergency repairs to or the emergency restoration of vital utilities, facilities, etc., destroyed or damaged by the hazard. The Defense Production Act, as it began, was much more complicated than it is today. At that time, it had, in 1950, it had 7 different titles: priorities and allocations, authority to requisition and condemn, expansion of productive capacity and supply, price and wage stabilization, settlement of labor disputes, control of consumer and real estate credit, and general provisions. Today, we have, I'm sorry, Title 1 is left over, priorities and allocations. Title 3, expansion of productive capacity and supply, and Title 7, general provisions. So let's talk about these titles. What are they? United States Code 50, Section 4511 allows the president to require the following when necessary to protect national defense. That would be to require contractors to accept and perform a contract, or contractors to prioritize performance of one contract over another. And that could be another government contract, or it could be a commercial contract. This is what's referred to as non-optional federal contracting. In other words, the government comes to you, says, I need you to build X, and you don't have the option of saying no. This statute also allows the president to allocate the following when necessary to protect national defense: materials, services, facilities, and energy. Materials, services, and facilities must be deemed scarce, critical, and essential to maintain or expand exploration, production, refining, transportation, to conserve energy supplies, or to construct or maintain energy facilities. This cannot be accomplished without exercising the allocation authority of Title I. Title I also allows the president to hoard. It prohibits industry from hoarding designated scarce materials. So if let's say it's wartime and lumber is scarce, right? What becomes illegal through the course of the Defense Production Act is accumulating of this scarce material in excess of reasonable business demands, personal or home consumption. So essentially, if you just stockpiling in a warehouse somewhere because the price is really high, that's becomes illegal. It's also illegal to accumulate these scarce materials for the purpose of resale at prices in excess of prevailing market prices. Yeah, basically using this opportunity to fleece people who necessarily need these resources becomes illegal through the Defense Production Act. So the president has this authority to deem materials as scarce. How do you decide what actually is scarce? That's because the president says it's scarce. Strengthening domestic capability empowers the president to take, quote, appropriate action to ensure the following are available and from reliable sources in response to national emergencies. That includes critical components, critical technology items, essential materials, and industrial resources. So, I mean, think of it like computer chips, stuff like that. The appropriate action that the president can take includes restricting contract competition to reliable and/or domestic sources, stockpiling of critical components, so that the government can do it. You can't, but the government can, and developing substitutes for critical items. So the president could say, hey, we need you to develop, we usually get these microchips from wherever. We need you to develop a substitute for us. And you don't have the option of saying no because it's Title I. Title I also allows for modernization of small business suppliers. So this is actually maybe a potentially excellent area of growth for small businesses. There is a, quote, strong preference for small business subcontractors and suppliers using DAPA authorities. I say DAPA, by the way. Defense Production Act is what I'm saying when I say DAPA. I know there's another type of DAPA in government contracting, so I don't want it to be confusing. It's when I say DAPA, I'm saying DPA or Defense Production Act. And special consideration is given to small businesses in areas of high unemployment or with a demonstrated pattern of economic decline. So this gets us sort of into Title III, the modernization of small business suppliers. Title III is where the government can use its buying power and lending power to help small businesses. Title III funds may be used to guarantee purchases of manufacturing equipment for small businesses. So if you have to ramp up, maybe you can use, the government can use the Title III authorities to help with that. When considering proposals for Title III work, small business should receive strong preference when It has support of the agency that will provide the guarantee. It demonstrates arrangements have been made to effectively utilize the advanced manufacturing equipment requested, and it otherwise meets the requirements of Title III. You're probably wondering, what is Title III? We're getting to that, I promise. All right. So what type of Title I projects, and again, these are projects that the government has essentially told companies they need to create. You have the ballistic missile defense system, the B-2 bomber, Air Force One, the president's airplane, MRAP vehicles, the FEMA response to electrical transmission systems in Puerto Rico, Department of Energy prioritization of natural gas to avoid the 2001 California blackouts, that type of thing. So actually, some pretty famous stuff was made, at least in part, thanks to the authorities of Title I. Title III, that's the title for the expansion of productive capacity and supply. The president has the authority for in the cases of national defense, to authorize agencies to guarantee loans by private institutions to support production capabilities that support national defense. So, pardon me. Sorry. Let me break that down for you. You need a loan to ramp up for a project, because in national defense, in the area of national defense, the bank is a little concerned. The government can come in and essentially be your cosigner on that loan. So loan guarantees are available for contractors, subcontractors, providers of critical infrastructure, and others. The loan guarantee authority cannot be used primarily to avert a company from going bankrupt unless the bankruptcy would have a direct and substantial adverse impact on defense production, and justification of the action is provided to various congressional committees. So, if they're gonna have if the U.S. government is going to guarantee a loan, that is going to require the president to make a few determinations, and they include that the loan supports production or supply that is essential to national defense. Absent such guarantee, sufficient credit is not available. The loan guarantee is effective, expedient, and a practical alternative. There is a reasonable expectation of repayment based on prospective earning power. Interest on the loan is deemed reasonable by the Secretary of the Treasury. The loan agreement provisions cannot be waived without consent of a federal fiscal agent, and the loan application provides assurance of repayment, a 20% bond, collateral, etc. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, the president has to decide that this loan is in the best interest of the United States. I'm sure that makes sense. Well, maybe it does. Is there a shortcut for the president making such determinations? Yes. If Congress or president declares a national emergency, then such determinations on a case-by-case basis do not need to be made. So the federal government may guarantee up to an aggregate of $50 million per shortfall before congressional committee notice is required. However, that notice may be waived during national emergencies. Now, so that was like the government as a cosigner. The government can also just give a loan. The president may make loans to private businesses in order to build up their capacity. Loans are available, much like the guarantees, to contractors, subcontractors, providers of critical infrastructure, and others. We seem to be doing pretty good on time. Yes, we're doing great on time. So I think we're going to have plenty of time for questions, FYI. Loans to private businesses are authorized when the financial assistance is not otherwise available from private sources on reasonable terms. So if the government needs you to do something for national defense, you need a loan to do it. the bank will not give the loan or offers the loan under unreasonable terms, that's when the government can step in and offer a loan on its own. So that was one way. The other way is during emergency declarations, when the president determines the following: that the loan supports production or support essential to national defense. Without the loan, American industry cannot produce the items in a timely manner. The loan is the most cost-effective, expedient, and practical strategy to meet the need. Anticipated earning power and pledged security of the borrower are reasonable assurance of repayment, and the loan interest rate is reasonable as determined by the Secretary of the Treasury. That's not all that Title III does. Title III also allows the president to take the following actions in the support of national defense. That's to purchase or give purchase commitments of resources for government use or resale, encourage exploration and mining of critical strategic materials, develop production capabilities, and increase use and implementation of emerging technologies. So this is like sort of just kind of a while it doesn't fit neatly into any of the other powers that Defense Production Act, so it can now fit into this catch-all provision. What do purchase and purchase commitments mean? The president may purchase or commit to purchasing resources or technology to support national defense. Prior to making purchase or commitments, the president must determine the supply, resource, or technology is essential to national defense. Absent this action, American industry cannot meet supply demands promptly. Purchase or purchase commitments are the most cost-effective, expedient, and practical solutions. Sounds familiar, right? These are kind of the same factors that you have to follow in order to get a loan or get a loan guarantee. Commodities, if the government uses the purchase or purchase commitments, these commodities must be resold at the lower of either the established ceiling price or the prevailing market rate. Subsidies, the president may subsidize domestically produced materials to ensure continued supply of high-cost resources or maintain stable pricing. So, I don't know, if aluminum, for example, becomes too costly to mine and produce, the president can provide subsidies to support that industry. Subsidies are authorized when the president finds either at generally fair market prices for raw material, there will be a decrease in the supply from high-cost sources that adversely impacts Defense Production Act objectives, or the cost of transportation has temporarily increased and threatens to impair maximum production or supply of a material at stable prices. Installation of federal property at private facilities. This is an interesting one. This is a power within the Defense Production Act. If the president determines that it would aid national defense, he or she may improve federal industrial facilities through equipment purchases or expansions, procure and install federally owned equipment in private facilities, provide for the expansion or modification of private facilities, transfer or sell federal property to private owners of production facilities. So, I think of this kind of like, all right, well, yeah, you need me to do this job, but this job I'm going to need like a laser cutter, and I don't have one. This power gives the government the opportunity to just say, you know what? Here's our laser cutter. We're going to put it in your plant. Does that make sense? There is a Defense Production Act fund. The statute creates the Defense Production Act fund to pay for loans and loans guaranteed, blah, 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 under Title III. The ceiling value of the fund is $750 million. That doesn't sound like a lot, but as you'll see from this chart going back to 2010 and up to 2020, which I think is the last year we have details about, they didn't actually get very close to that 750. In fact, the highest in that decade is 223 million. used out of that fund. There are some interesting examples of Title III projects. Nothing as awe-inspiring as like the B-2 bomber, but developing biofuels for emergency and commercial use, the Ka-band gallium nitric monolithic microwave integrated circuits. Title III powers were used to develop domestic capacity to produce these circuits. But the truth is the loans and the loan guarantee authorities have actually not been used for more than 30 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about Title VII. There's really not a ton to talk about, except that Title VII does discuss small businesses. Small business concerns shall be given the maximum practical opportunity to participate as contractors and subcontractors at various tiers in all programs to maintain and strengthen the nation's industrial base and technology base undertaken pursuant to this act. So basically, small businesses should be included in these projects. With respect to resource allocations, and again, remember, the government can stockpile resources if it wants to, and it can allocate them as it sees fit. Small businesses should be provided a quote a fair share of those resources. So small businesses are supposed to receive a proportionate portion of the materials, commensurate with what it will receive during normal conditions, right? So if, pardon me, oh my God, I need to blow my nose. Sorry about that. The good thing is that small businesses are not going to be left out in the cold here under Defense Production Act stuff. So what contracting opportunities are there under Title III? Well, there is a Title III office, and it's responsible for administrating DAPA Title III opportunities to identify and mitigate critical industrial base shortcomings. There are two interfaces between the Title III office and industry. That's the request for information. This is obviously put out by the office. It seeks information from industry regarding capabilities in specific areas, guides development of future funding, and then there's the funding opportunity announcement, provides DAPA funding to address production areas shortfalls. So basically, the office will say, hey, there's funding available for X, and then you can reach out and bid on that project. These are just some recent determinations. Some of these are pretty interesting here. COVID-19 response, March 27th, 2020. There was no limit to the amount of spending that could be done based on that. Supply chain resilience from February of 2023. I think that was when the boat was stuck in the Suez Canal. You all remember that? But anyway, this is just sort of an interesting list of recent presidential determinations related to the Defense Production Act. That is the end of my part of this presentation. I'm more than happy to take some questions. What can I do for you all?
Thank you, Matthew. That was great. And I do appreciate you soldiering on despite not feeling 100%. So I know how hard that can be. So I do appreciate that. So yeah, now's your opportunity to ask Matthew any questions, or if there's anything you'd like him to go over again in the presentation, you can just type it in the chat box. And while we're waiting to see if any questions come through, just like to remind you that your Apex Accelerator is here to assist you on all government contracting matters. So if you're not already registered, please do so. I can't speak for Mississippi, but for Maryland, it's currently a 30-day wait to be assigned a counselor due to the demand. But we definitely will get to you as soon as we can. I know we have Jessica from Mississippi. on the call. Jessica, did you want to say anything about your process?
Yes, if you're in Mississippi and you do not have an advisor, you can go to msapexaccelerator.org to register with us as a client, and you'll be assigned an advisor, usually within 24 to 48 hours. So
Oh,
that's all.
wow. You get seen in Mississippi way quicker than in Maryland. So
Well,
you have
you
to.
all have the, all the historically all the government contractors are in DC area, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Well, for now they are.
yeah, right.
So yeah, you're gonna get help a lot quicker if you're in Mississippi. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So thanks again, Matthew. Thanks, Jessica, for co-sponsoring this, and thanks everybody for participating. I will send out the slides, and the recording will be available later today. And we hope to see you at a future Apex Accelerator event. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.